Sefer Breisheet Parak Tet Zayin is a sad story overall, which, depending on which among the commentators one follows, may have indeed implications that we're still playing out today as a result of the actions of Sarah and of Avram Avinu, which is quite something. But we're going to get into that momentarily. So first things first, to remind us that what's transpired until now, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on review, but we didn't learn last week, and I see some fresh faces this morning, so good morning and welcome, is that in terms of Perek Tedvav, chapter 15, was really about the covenant between Hashem and Avram Avinu. And we note that the covenant is about themes and currents of history that are going to play out over an extended period of time. We spent a long time trying to parse the numbers and trying to crunch the numbers. 400 years, 430 years. In the end, the Jewish people are in Mitzrayim 210 years. So we saw that whole line, and methodologically, we talked about the interplay between the chronology as is described in the level of Pshat and the chronology as we have it based on Chazal, trying to fit all the pieces together, and the appreciation that perhaps things are not always written in the Torah in chronological order. This is not just something we discovered. We were just together exploring the theme of Chazal, which goes by the term Ein Mukdam U'Muchar B'Torah. There's no earlier and later in the Torah. When we get to Perek Tet Zayin, though, we will be able pretty much to know the timeline of when this happened. And the reason we know this, and I'm opening with this, is just to sort of orient us, is to appreciate that this is chapter 16. This is a story of Sarai, Avram, and Hagar, and the birth of Yishmael at the end of this chapter. And we know that Avram Avinu, further along in chapter 17, will be the story of the Brit Milah and the covenant of Brit Milah. And we know for sure that this happens, the Brit Milah itself transpires when Yishmael is 13. Avram Avinu is 86 years of age when this story happens. Another way we know this is 85, really. The other way we know this is, we'll see now, in the Psukim, actually says they've been living in Eretz Canaan for 10 years when this story unfolds with Avram, Sarai, Hagar. Now, the reason I bring this up is for two reasons. Number one, the reality that we saw this very strange, but with firm grounding in our tradition, this idea that Avram Avinu somehow came to Eretz Canaan twice, once when he's 70 and again when he's 75. I'm not going down that road now because that'll take us out into the wilderness again of trying to understand how that could be and what it means. But we also know that the second reason I'm mentioning it, and therefore this chapter 16, certainly the 10 years being referenced here is the 10 years after 75. Because again, Abraham is 86 years old when Yishmael is born, and we know he's 99 when the Brit Milah happens. Everyone with me? 99 when Hashem comes to him and tells him about Brit Milah. It's chapter 17. So if Avram's 99, and it says Yishmael's 13, so obviously Yishmael was born when Avram Avinu is 86 years of age. Therefore, the 10 years goes that way. The other question, and this is really back to the sort of the narration piece of this, is chapter 15 is a covenant, Brit Ben Abitarim, and coming attractions, chapter 17, in this case, happens to work out that the chapter headings uniquely, or not uniquely, but rarely, but here is an example, the chapter numbers actually match the themes of what's going on by the lights of Chazal as well, right? So it totally does not. And because the chapter numbers, I say each time, was made up in the Middle Ages, not by friendly hands, but people who are not our friends who wanted to engage us and force us to engage in polemics to try to defend what they thought was an antiquated faith, an old faith in the sense of being discarded, Rahman al-Islam. So they put in the numbers. But here it does work. Chapter 15, covenants, the covenant between the parts, Brit Ben Abitarim. Chapter 17, Perek Yud Zayin, Brit Milah. Sandwiched in between those two, the bridge in between those two, is the story of Avram, Sarai, and Hagar. We may not get to the answer today, but just to sort of set it up, that sandwich in between the bookends is this story. And in this story, I think we encounter a lot of layers of complexity about human interactions. We'll see that presently. Paraktet Zion, Pasuk Aleph. Anyone have preliminary comments they need to make before we start? Can we get rolling? Wow, it's a slow morning. Everyone's quiet. Okay, feel free to, I hope people have the capacity to unmute themselves if they need to, but feel free also to use the chat to write in comments. Let's go. V'sarai eshet Avram, lo yalda lo. V'lah shivcha mitzrit u'shma Hagar. Sarai, the wife of Avram, has not given him children, and she has an Egyptian maidservant whose name is Hagar. We don't need any Mefarshi Mikra first, just on the level of Pshat. Didn't you know that Avram is married to Sarai? By the by, the Gemara says you should not call Avraham Avram. His name is changed, it doesn't go back. But since the Psukim use the expression Avram, I'm amplifying that. It's going to be necessary for next week, God willing, when we get to chapter 17 of the name change. The Gemara, though, makes a point that when you talk about Avraham Avinu, you shouldn't refer to him as Abram or Avram, because his name was changed, as opposed to Yaakov, who is Yaakov Yisrael, and it oscillates, and it doesn't fully, it changes, but there's always this oscillation. We'll get to Yaakov when we get to Yaakov. We knew already Avram Avinu was married to Sarah Imeinu. So why did the Torah have to tell us again? And this is Sarai, the Eshet Avram. The Torah starts with this koteret. This is a title pasuk that teaches us and reminds us that, in fact, here's how the relationships were set up. There was already a hierarchy. Sarai is the wife of Avram, and she has, in the possessive sense, a maidservant whose name is Hagar. Now, here's the crucial pasuk, or psukim, to me, are really at the beginning, because it sets the frame to understand how things played out, and it's very easy, by the by, without paying attention to the psukim, to go down what I think is a treacherous path. Vatomer Sarai el Avram, hinena atzarani Hashem miledet. We'll take it in a few pieces. All right? Sarai is the one who initiates the speech to Avram. It's her idea. And her idea is to say to Avram, behold, Hashem has prevented me from being able to have children. It's not something biological. Well, it is biological, but I understand that whatever's happening to me biologically is a result of chapter 16. Chapter 16. Welcome, Elliot. Chapter 16, verse 2. Pasuk Bet. Sarai says to Avram, she says to him, Hashem has caused me to be unable to have children. Okay. Which, okay, I mean, but the point that she is a deeply religious person, and she appreciates it. This hasn't happened, there's a reason. And that doesn't mean I'm going to roll up into a ball and decide that just because it's from God, therefore that's my fate, capital F. Au contraire, let us figure out what we have at our disposal to try to reckon with it. Bona el shivchati ulai ibane mimena. All right? And she uses that expression about the shivcha, right? Come into my shivcha, my maidservant. Maybe I can be built from her. The Mefarshi Mikra point out ibane means milashon ben, to have a son. Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. Avram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. We'll hear that exact line, that pasuk, in a not exact. We'll have the same language in a variant form later on, which we read each year, not only Parshat Vayera, but on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, Hashem will say to Avram Avinu, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, shma b'kola. Hearken to everything that Sarah Imeinu says to you. Now, but this opening piece now has the third pasuk. And just listen for the relationships that are being mentioned, as if the Torah, not as if, the Torah is pressing the button. Vatikach Sarai, Eshet Avram, et Hagar HaMitzrit, Shivchata. Miketz Etzer Shanim L'Shevet Avram Be'eretz Canaan. It's after 10 years that they're living this. So Sarai, the wife of Avram, it's highlighting those words. Yeah, takes Hagar HaMitzrit, her maidservant, gives her over Be'eretz Canaan. There were 10 years that he lived there. Vatitain Ota LeAvram Isha Lol Isha. And so she gave her to Avram, her husband, to be a wife. Sarai brings up the idea. Sarai takes the initiative. Avram Avinu passive. The Mefarshim point out, the Ramban is very to this idea, especially when it says in Pasuk Bet, Vayishma Avram L'Kol Sarai, he listened to her voice, but it doesn't say that he did whatever she asked. She asked him to do something in Pasuk Bet. He heard her voice. Then she took the actions. In other words, he's very reluctant, and let me use the word ambivalent about this setup, but the ambivalence therefore needs to be overcome by Sarai herself. She's the one taking the initiative. Follow? It's her idea, and it's actually on a certain level her execution of the idea to a point, and reminding us again and again what the relationships were here. Yeah? We'll come to the Mefarshim in a minute. I'm just trying to get the lay of the land. So, Vayavo el Hagar Batar Vatereki Harata Vatekal Gvirta Be'eneha. Now, just on the level of Pshat, before we get to the Mefarshim HaMikra, which is of course crucial, but just on the level of Pshat, what does this mean? As soon as she became pregnant, as soon as Hagar becomes pregnant, Sarai sees this, and the Torah testifies that Hagar now seems to be looking askance at Sarai. Yeah, she became light in her eyes. And notice that it mentions that Vatikal Gvirta Be'eneha. The Torah wants to remind us again. She, Sarai, is the Gvira. She's the matron. She's in charge, and I'm meant to be subordinate. It says Sarai, but it says Hagar rather. But the fact that I became pregnant, that made me somehow not only on a par with her, but maybe she, Sarai, is now less than me. And we know that from the reaction of Sarah Imeinu. Vatomer Sarai el Avram chamasi alecha. Anochi natati shivchati b'cheikecha. Vatere ki harata. Va'ikal be'eneha. Yishpot Hashem beini uvenecha.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
What I don't understand. Okay, later on in the Torah, when they talk about slavery or having servants, indentured servants or something like that, it would seem to me that Hagar is an indentured servant. What kind of rights did they have? Was the master or the master's son allowed to take a servant without her consent as far as sexually? Because that appears to be what's going on here. There's never seems to be any consent of Hagar. This seems to be Sarai's idea. And, maybe when she conceived so quickly, I didn't want to do this to begin with. But now my stock is going to go up, and maybe I'll get to be some kind of wife.
Right.
We have surrogacy contracts nowadays.
True.
They must. I believe they have them also in Mesopotamia too, where heirs sometimes had to be adopted. So it'd be very interesting to know what those contracts were and whether they're following that.
Yeah, I don't know. You're certainly giving us a question to think about through the lens of the time period in which we live in the 21st century. I don't believe that that they had any surrogacy contract per se. You can think of another analog, by the way, with Bilhah and Zilpah, who'll come later. Yeah, which when we get to them, we'll have to also understand what happens there. But it's almost
actually there were surrogacy. They have found, clay tablets with some of the contracts from Mesopotamia. And it would be spelled out what happens if the primary wife later on gives birth and then it disinherits the first, it would disinherit the surrogate's child.
I have never done any work in trying to understand it within the context of ancient Mesopotamia. Thank you. I was not aware of that at all. The Torah doesn't testify one way or the other. Rashi does point out that when it says Vatikach Sarai Eshet Avram et Hagar Mitzrit, Rashi, based on the Medrash Rabbah, says that Sarai cajoled her, encouraged her. Lekachta betvarim. She took her with words. As the word lakachat has that connotation as well sometimes. Ashraich shezachit lidabek beguf kadosh kazeh. Fortunate are you, Hagar, that you merit to be able to cleave to this holy person. Your point is well taken, but I think it's a little bit anachronistic, only in the sense that it doesn't say that Hagar gave consent. That's true, but it doesn't say that she was upset about it. Au contraire, she thought this was like a great way to climb the ladder, socially or maritally, right? Because the net result after that is she looks down at her own at her matron. She looks down at her instead of being able to see that this was part of some kind of arrangement, right? That would enable Avram and Sarah to raise a child, maybe co-parenting with Hagar, something like that. That is somewhat what seems to happen, by the way, with Bilhah and Zilpah, who, according to some sources in Chazal, by the by, when we talk about, well, I don't want to go too far down this road, but the four imahot, we speak about the four imahot. So someone asks you on the street, who are the four imahot? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Yeah, but there's some sources actually in Chazal that say the four imahot are Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah. Yeah, Dalet imahot. And from them came the 12 tribes, that they're elevated. We don't have time to see that now. We'll get to that when we get to Parshat Vayetze in about 100 years from now. But as long as we go so slowly, we have to keep learning. There's no choice. But your point is well taken. I don't know what kind of arrangement they had. I do know that Avram Avinu is ambivalent, to put it mildly, about going ahead with this. The Ramban says he's totally passive, and you see that from the words Vayishma Avram L'Kol Sarai, and he didn't do anything. He listened to her voice. I hear you. Did he say to her, I hear you? Yes, dear. He didn't do anything.
How come he didn't say to her, he who heard God say you're going to have a child, say to her, well, God wanted me to have a child through somebody else besides you. He had plenty of time to tell me when we had the conversation.
Yes. Okay. You're on to something. And this is one of the pathways to try to understand why chapter 16 comes after chapter 15. By the by, why did Sarai say to Avram Avinu, Chamasi alecha, right? Look at the whatever violence. The word Hamas means violence, usually some kind of a taking away of something by force. Think of the pasuk Batimaleha Aretz Hamas, which transpires toward the beginning of the Torah in the early chapters before the Great Flood. That's the coup de grace. That's the straw that breaks the camel's back for the flood. Is that the earth has been filled with Hamas. Hamas means violence, but it's like a violent thievery. It's some kind of a rapacious grabbing. So the Hamas that's been perpetrated against me, Sarai says to Avram, is on you. I gave you my shivcha. I put her into your lap, basically. And look, she saw that she became pregnant. I became light in her eyes. May God judge between the two of us. I mean, this is a husband and wife having a quarrel, yeah? Karen? You're muted. Okay. Now you're unmuted. No, now you muted yourself again. Go ahead.
If this thing was Sarah's idea.
It was.
She's the one that pushed. This
is
like she's the one that kind of did the pushing. This is like a modern marriage. It's like, it was my idea, but why did you take it? And now I'm mad at you.
Yes, which only adds to the sense of confusion. Oh, that's what you just wrote here. I didn't see it. Right. Exactly. It's Avram Avinu's idea. So no, it's Sarah's idea. Avram didn't even do anything. Sarah did it. Exactly. Now she turns around. Oh, terrible. And you didn't do it. Okay. But the answer starts exactly what Shelley said. Let's go back now and try to see some of the other layers of this. Most immediately, let's say the following. Most immediately on this very pasuk, on Chamasi alecha, pasuk hey. First of all, Rashi writes, Chamas ha'asui li the violence done to me. Alecha ani matil ha'onesh. I put the punishment upon you. When you, Avraham, davened in the last parak, chapter 15, you said to God, Master of the universe, what will you give me? I am walking barren. You davened for you. You didn't daven for me. Now, them's his fighting words, because one of the hallmarks of an Avram Avinu is in fact that he does what? He davens for others. Open and easy, low-hanging fruit example in Sdom. That's what he's doing. Obvious. There are other examples as well. Before Sarah Imeinu gives birth in chapter 21. So in chapter 20, at the end, there's an interaction with Avimelech. The Gemara learns, if you have something wrong, you have a problem, you should daven for the other, and you'll also, you'll be included in that tefillah. The Gemara learns this from who? Avram Avinu. Where? From Parak Chaf. Okay, but this is Parak Tet Zayin, chapter 16. Avram Avinu, we learn, is on a learning curve. You, says Rashi, the Sarah says to Avraham, you should have davened for both of us. V'hayiti ani nifkedet imcha. I would have been remembered and recalled alongside you, and you didn't do that. Ve'od, and further, dvarecha ata chomes mimeni. Your words are bringing about the violence upon me. It's not exact formulation, but your words. You know what your words are? Shata shomea bizoni v'shotek. You know what violence you're doing to me? Sarah says to Avraham, you're being quiet when you see this whole thing unfolding. Why didn't you rise to my defense with the matter of Hagar, what she's done to me? Sarah says. The first part of Rashi is theological. It's us and Hashem. Avram, you know why we're in this predicament? I realize now it happened really because of you. Why did you daven for both of us? By the by, where do you see the tikkun for this? Where's the tikkun, the fix for this issue intergenerationally? What's the next generation of Klal Yisrael going to be? A couple who doesn't have children. And the couple doesn't have children. They're married 20 years before they have children. Yitzchak and Rivka. And we learned at the beginning of Parshat Toldot that the Torah will say that they're davening facing each other. They're each davening for the other. You see the tikkun of the next generation. And you'll see that in the third generation, that's going to be part of the conversation about Yaakov and Rachel about having children as well. Where she's convinced that if Yaakov will just give her the children, and Yaakov's saying, am I God? I can't do that. I'm davening like you're davening, right? But you see, this is an ongoing theme. Who davens for who? And in Rashi wants to amplify. Number one, it's about tefillah. Number two, there's a human interaction thing going on here. And Sarai says to Avram, you didn't defend me in the internal marital squabble that's going on between three people. Yeah. And here we are. You sat quietly. By the way, Rashi quoting from the Medrash Rabbah here. What does it mean he sat quietly? I'm saying, I don't know what to do now. She encouraged me. She brought those women to me. And now this woman, so she has, she has some kind of a lighter thought, lesser thought about Sarah Imeinu. No, but what can I do? Lashon hara. What I have to speak now. What am I going to say to Hagar? How dare you think those thoughts? That's what she thinks. I don't know. Sarah says, no, you see that she's treating me badly, etc. She looks askance at me. Sorry, yeah.
What about the fact that Sarah is going to basically call down the midat of din, which you're never supposed to do? Let Hashem judge between me and you. Yeah. Why on earth did she ever do that?
It's Taka a good question. It's a good question. This is actually Rashi goes down this road as well of asking what happened here. The fact that she brought it up in this way. the Mefarshim point out, the Gemara in fact points out that Sarah gave over her judgment here. This was an interpersonal conflict. She said, "Let Hashem judge between us." Yeah, but anyone who says, "Let God judge between us," so they're going to be punished first. They're going to be punished first. And in fact, the Gemara makes the point that that's why Sarah Imeinu dies before Avram Avinu. In other words, she called down judgment on him, but also really on them. Yishpot Hashem beini uveinecha. And in the end, she gets punished first. She's judged first, i.e., Vayavo Avraham lispod l'sarav livkota parshat Chayisar. She dies first. Now, that's on a plane that I think is very hard for us to really understand. What do you mean? Like, because she just said that, so therefore she should die first because of one line in one quarrel with her husband that happens to be published for posterity in the Sefer Torah? Like, okay, but these are great souls. It's Sarah Imeinu, it's Avram Avinu. And in fact, the Gemara makes this point that really that is how it works. And therefore, a person should be very careful about saying, throwing things away by saying there should be a judgment between the two of us actually does bring up an issue that holds that original person in the dock, asking that the other be judged. But witness the greatness of Sarah Imeinu, how this whole thing started. For the idea that she was willing to include in some way some other person, and this is in antiquity, in her marital union in order to be able to have a child. If you think about it, Sarah, that means, according to Rashi at least, based on the Medrash Rabbah, Sarah Imeinu is aware that Avram Avinu and Hashem have made this covenant in which Hashem has promised Avram Avinu that he's going to have a child, and now there is no child. So she's saying, well, what part can I have in fulfilling this covenant? And she starts to realize maybe it's not going to be me. According to Rashi, though, also, just staying with that line, if you go one pasuk earlier, pasuk Daled, what does it mean that Sarai looked lesser now, diminished in the eyes of Hagar? Why did that matter? So Rashi explains that really, according to Hagar, and maybe more than just Hagar, the idea that Sarah Imeinu is not the person she presents herself as in public, that there's some split between the public Sarah, the image of the great Tzaddiket, and the private Sarai. How do we know that, says Hagar? She didn't have any child all these years. And right away, the first union with Avram Avinu, there's a child. Ergo, she's not as great as she says she is. She's just not. Now, is that just Hagar saying that? Or is that kind of the scuttlebutt that's going around, if you will, on the internet? Or more than that, is Sarah Imeinu doubting herself? It's the old, good things come to good people. And bad things, well, you must deserve it in some way. Sarah Imeinu is saying to Avram Avinu, seriously, it's bad enough that I don't have a child. But the net result of my sacrificial action should be that people are now saying, and maybe Sarah Imeinu is internalizing for herself, how successful and how meant to be it was that Sarah should give away Avram to Hagar, or bring Hagar to Avram Avinu. How do we know? She had a child right away. She's pregnant already. She's having a child, Mazel and Bracha. The other one, and that, Yishpot Hashem beini uveinecha, let Hashem judge between us. The idea here that called into question is not just the reality that Sarah Imeinu is being persecuted, someone looks at her, with a jaundiced eye. Here it's that there's now doubt about the righteousness of Sarah Imeinu. By the way, this doubt about the righteousness of Sarah Imeinu and the notion of the defense of same is going to come up again. It's going to come up again. The first time it came up was not here. The first time it came up is where? in Mitzrayim. Because she's taken by Paro. And then she's rescued from Paro before anything bad could happen, if you will. But you could imagine, as later on, there will be people who will be making a claim. Who will make that claim? Yishmael will make a claim that maybe Yitzchak Avinu, whose face, according to Chazal, looked identical to that of Avram Avinu, deliberately so to avoid and prevent people, forestall people from making this claim. But there was a claim being made that when Sarah Imeinu later will be taken by Avimelech, really Yitzchak Avinu is the child of the union of Sarah and Avimelech. Chalila v'chas. Not true. Now, why I'm bringing that up? Look at the first pasuk. The first pasuk in Perek Tet Zayin. Sarai Eshet Avram didn't have children. And who does she have? A Shivcha Mitzrit. Why do we need to know she's Egyptian? The level of pshat is very clear why. Because Egypt exercises great influence on everything and everyone in the ancient Near East. If you're not under the banner of Mesopotamia and its kingdoms, you're under the banner of the Egyptian realm. They have influence. It's like Lahavdil, like today in a certain way, right? It's sort of these independent states that are somehow under the influence of Russia, or America. They sort of encroach. So if you look at Rashi, right at the very beginning, Breishit Rabbah, Rashi amplifies, quoting from the Medrash, that it's not just that she was a Shivcha Mitzrit, she's Davka, the Bat Paro. She's not just any person from Mitzrayim, she's the daughter of Paro. When she, the daughter of Paro, sees the miracles that happen to Sarah Imeinu, what miracles are those? Of salvation, of the inability of Paro to come near her. By Nagah Hashem at Paro, the Torah testifies God sent plague against Paro. She says, Mutav shetahei bat biti, biti shivcha, b'bayit zev lo gvira b'bayit acher. Right? So the idea here that Paro himself declared at the moment that he saw these miracles with Sarah Imeinu, where he tries to come near her and he has these strange plagues happening to him, he lets her go unscathed. And what's the gift? He says, I'd rather that my own daughter should be a maidservant in this household, even though she comes from nobility and royalty, she should be subservient to this royal household of Avram and Sarah, better than she should be a matron in another house, i.e., even to become the great princess of Egypt. This will have a parallel later on the level of pshat. This is exactly what's going to happen. Well, not exactly, but it's going to be related to what's going to happen with another Bat Paro in Sefer Shmot. Remember? So the notion of Maseh Avot Simon Labanim, we talked about that before. Avram Avinu, like the Jewish people, goes down to Mitzrayim. The daughters of the Jewish people are Bat Techayun. That was the plan: kill the boys and take the girls and raise them and breed more Egyptians and destroy the Jewish people that way. That's the book of Shmot. And Sefer Breishit, that's what's going on with Sarah Imeinu. Avram Avinu is worried, I'm going to get killed and they're going to take you. Then there's plagues. 10 plagues over there, 1 plague over here. There's gifts as they leave. Avram and Sarah get gifts. And the Jewish people, and there are gifts that come to the Jewish people. And in the case of the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim, who do they take with them? Erev Rav. The people who want to come along because the times are great. So from there, we understand, where's the analog to before? Here she is. Hagar, Shivcha Mitzrit. And she comes along, and according to Chazal, at least, the level of medrash, that's why the Torah has to amplify. This is who she is. Now, just to complete the picture. Now Sarah Imeinu thinking, okay, what do I have to do now? There's a covenant that Hashem made with Avram Avinu. We've been married 10 years we've been married more than 10 years, but 10 years we live in Eretz Canaan. By the way, if the Brit Bein HaBetarim, the covenant between the parts, according to the Bali Tosfot and all those who maintain that it happened when Avram Avinu was 70, understand? So now why is that 10 years relevant? Because they've now been living straight 10 years. The clock of the covenant started in year 1 when they arrived in the land when Avram is 75 and Sarah Imeinu is 65. Now it's 10 years later, he's 85, she's 75. Now it's 10 full years. She's saying, okay, we lived here already 10 years. The covenant was supposed to happen. Never mind all the years, the decades before. But these 10 years have been crucial But the one acquisition, in quotation marks, air quotes, that we made is that the princess of Egypt is with us. She's nobility. She's connected to a royal line. Maybe what's supposed to happen to Imeinu is I'm supposed to engage in sacrificial action to give away my husband, if you will, for that to be able to be a next generation. And that generation is, in fact, about raising up Mitzrayim, the profile of Mitzrayim spiritually in this way. Follow? Karen, you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, it just, I mean, Sarah's name means princess.
Yes.
So you have Sarah, who's a princess, taking in an Egyptian
Princess.
baby as her own, and then you have the converse. You have the Egyptian princess taking in the Hebrew baby as her own.
Yeah.
And they both princess.
Beautiful. Yeah. By the way, the word Sarah is Milashon Svara, is authority. Yiska, her other name, is Milashon Nisicha, the princess. But it's the same idea. So ruler, right? But you have that right here, right? Right. Beautiful. Beautiful idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You see the conflict going on in Vayomer Pasuk Vav now.
Wait, Rabbi, I just got one problem.
Please.
We are originally introduced to Yifta as an Akara. The first introduction to her,
yes,
it's Kula Alma Lo Pligi, that she's an Akara. And so, since it's stated so boldly, what do we want from her? I mean, this is what she is.
Yeah.
And so this whole story of getting a child from her is very complicated.
Very complicated. And it's easy for us from our perch in the 21st century to look askance and decide, but that's why I'm trying to highlight all the nuances. It's very complicated. The emotional register of this parak is very, very high. In Pasuk Vav, look, Vayomer Avram al Sarai, Yeshiv Chatech biyadeich. Behold, your maidservant is in your hand. Asila atov be'inah, do whatever you like. And the Torah testifies, Taneh Sarai v'tivrach mipaneh. Sarai oppressed her. Sarai oppressed Hagar, and Hagar ran away. Rashi just comments from the Medrash. She really was very rough with her. She made her work very hard. Now she's a pregnant woman. She made her work very hard. But I want to share with you, and I got to read it out loud, because if I don't read it, you won't. You'll say maybe I sugarcoated it or something. Here's the Ramban's few words about this idea of Taneh Sarai v'tivrach mipaneh. And it highlights the complexity of the reality of what's going on. Vatana Sarai v'tivrach mipaneh, says Rashi, Chat'a Imeinu be'inui hazeh. Our matriarch sinned in causing this suffering. V'gam Avraham b'hanicho la'asot kain. And Avraham also sinned, that's what he means, in permitting this to happen. And therefore, V'shama Hashem el Onya, v'natan labein sheyehei pere Adam, and God heard her suffering, the suffering of Hagar, and therefore God gave her a child who would be a pere Adam, a wild man, la'anot zera Avraham v'Sara b'chol minei ha'inui, to oppress the children of Avraham and Sarah in all measure of oppression. Lots to unpack here, and we're running out of time. Number one, according to the Ramban, I didn't say it, I won't open my mouth, but the Ramban said, by the Radak basically says the same thing as well. Sarah did wrong here. Avraham Avinu did wrong here. More than that, they sinned. They sinned. Mori v'Rabbi Rav Lichtenstein Zecher Tzaddik v'Kodesh Livracha has a line, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, the more we see the patriarchs and the matriarchs as angels, the less we are able to see them as great people. The Ramban, we've seen it a few times now, really does see that Avram Avinu and Sarah Imeinu are the greatest of tzaddikim, but that does not mean that they don't make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes, in the case of Ramban, he takes it from Chazal, he didn't make it up. Everything that happens with Avram Avinu and Sarah Imeinu is setting down a path to the generations of causality. You say to me, all the suffering the Jewish people ever endured from the children of Yishmael, it's all because our great Bubby wasn't nice to this woman who was calling into question her righteousness and probably spreading with her magical, diabolical fingers on Facebook and everywhere else. Sorry, Imeinu's no tzadekis. How do I know? She is a mule. She hasn't had any children. I got pregnant the first go around with Avram. So Avram's righteous, and so am I. But Sarah, she's yesterday's news. And sorry, Imeinu can't take it anymore. And Avram Avinu says, fine, just do whatever you want. And what does Sarah do? She tries to right the ship, if you will, of hierarchy. I'm in charge. You're not. You're still the shivcha. Says the Ramban, that's a chait. That's a chait. She shouldn't have done that. Whatever your emotional issues, it still didn't justify what she did, according to Ramban. By the way, Rashi, you don't see the word chait here whatsoever for Rashi. Ramban, Radak, and others really feel it didn't mean that Sarah Imeinu wasn't a great person. As I tried to spend this whole shir really amplifying the emotional anguish of a Sarah Imeinu, of setting up the realities of Hagar is the living exemplar of Sarah Imeinu's righteousness, because Paro, who was unable to conquer, quotation marks, Sarah Imeinu, decided to give away his own daughter to live in that household as the hired help, better than to be nobility. So great did he feel it was an Avram Avinu as Sarah Imeinu. And yet, the person who is the Shivcha HaMitzrit, who was once nobility, but it was gone, but was always waiting, when am I going to have my chance? And the person who was herself engaged by Sarah Imeinu's own testimony in an element of Hamas. The Hamas here is that now Hagar had tried to usurp Sarah Imeinu's covenantal role through her speech, nonetheless does not mean that Hagar is valueless in her relationship as a human being with others. And as we see in the intervening psukim right after that, what happens? Next pasuk, astounding. I thought this woman was no good. I thought she had nothing going for her. I thought she was a zero. I thought she was, after all, the servant. Shelley made the point before, was any of this even consensual? The next pasuk, unbelievable. Malach Hashem al ein hamayim b'midbar al ha'ayin b'derech shur. Tells you where it is. We don't have time to see all the geographical points. An angel found her. Vayomar, Hagar shifchat Sarai. Amplifying. Let's start with the following. You know more than the shifcha of Sarai. But, Emi zevat v'ana telechi. Where do you come from? Where are you going? The Malach didn't know? The Malach knew 100%. The Malach Hashem Tzavakos asking Hagar, tell me your problems. Unburden yourself. Vatomer mipnei Sarai givirti. Why did she say Sarai givirti? Didn't it say 2 or 3 psukim before? But they called gvirta be'eneha. Okay, Hagar realized her error. She does tshuva. She's saying, I appreciate. I'm leaving because of Sarai, my matron. Anochi barach, that's who I'm running from. V'yomer la malach Hashem. Shuvi el gvirteach v'tani tachat yadea. Go back and suffer whatever suffering she imposes upon you. Why? V'yomer la malach Hashem explains to her. It explains to her. Harba arbe et zarech v'lisefemiros. You will have many, many children. They will not be able to be counted because there will be so many of them. Sounds like promises that were given to Avram Avinu previously. Look at chapter 13. After Lot leaves, that's what Hashem basically tells Avram Avinu. That's in chapter 15 about the counting of the stars. Vayomer la malach Hashem, hina charav yuladet bein. V'karat shemo Yishmael, ki shama Hashem el onyech. God has heard your suffering. Now, this is the first of 2 times that we have a story of Sarah of Hagar, speaking to Malachim. But to be able to accept the idea that another person who is not part of any kind of covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people could have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, could hear from Malachim, Hayitachen. So for this, we don't need Midrashei Chazal. It's in the Pshat. And it's a bitter pill for many of us to swallow, but we need to swallow it and to appreciate it. That even, and I tremble as I say it because it's hard to evoke the words because it feels so terrible, but it's still a reality, that our opponents, enemies, and foes, in many instances, are not themselves without any merit whatsoever. It's not we're everything and they're zero. And Hagar, whatever we want to say about her, whatever her faults and flaws, you see there is a tshuva process here. She does say, Sarai Gvirti. And the Malach tells her, go back and suffer whatever you have to suffer. But know this, you will have a child because of your suffering. Suffering imposed upon you by Imeinu. You're going to have a child. His name will be Yishmael. His very name will be about God hearing. By the way, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, written by the Tanur of Eliezer of Hyrcanus, will write in one place that the word Yishmael, ultimately, that was its original meaning, but that its later meaning is God will hear all of the suffering that the nation born of Yishmael will bring about against the Jewish people. So, that's many generations hence.
Rabbi?
Yes.
We all know the spoiler alert, that later on there's going to be the medrash that Keturah is Hagar.
Exactly.
So if
another point of
that's that really, I mean, then you've got Abraham taking her back.
Yes.
Talk about slapping the face to Sarah. He's already got his spiritual heir of Yitzhak.
Yeah.
He's going back to Hagar and possibly another concubine, and making a bunch of kids that he then has to send away from Ishmael. Yeah. It's a troubling story.
From Yitzchak. Yes, Inachinami. Is Keturah actually Hagar? Is it not Hagar? We have to get to that when we get to Parshat Vayera. But you're right. Again, the idea here, and you see this, you see what's going on, is the whole idea. God is telling Hagar, by the way, there's going to be something amazing coming from your child. Now, I don't know how positive it is when the Torah says, he'll be a wild man, and his hand will be on everything, and one thing's hand will be upon him. He's going to live everywhere. He's going to be all over the place, right? But you're right. This is the complexity of it. By the way, that's one of the things of Rosh Hashanah. Obvious, yeah. It's one of the things of Rosh Hashanah also that's going on. That Hashem heard the cries of a Hagar HaMitzrit was heard by Hashem. How could that be? Because they also can have a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not everyone. You're all, everything. You're nothing. There's a much more complicated landscape. And by the by, that's the Gemara on the words of the Torah, Ba'asher Husham, that the Malachim say to Hashem, kill Yishmael now. He's out in the desert. Let him die over there. Because look at the terrible things that the Bnei Yishmael will later perpetrate against the Jews. What does God say? It's a Gemara Mefureshes. The Gemara says, Hashem said, well, did he do these things now? No. Good. I judge people where they are now, not what they're going to do in the future. Ba'asher Husham. You'll tell me there are many questions about that with the Ben Sora and Mora and many questions. I get it. I don't know. But that's the Gemara. And that's one of the things we have, Rosh Hashanah. Now that we don't read this parsha. I don't read from Lecha, it's from Vayera. But just consider what this whole thing is now. It's 10:04. I got to let you go because you have another shir. Just to see the last two psukim. Vatikra Shem Hashem Devarei Le'ata El Ro'i Ki Amra Gam Halom Ra'iti Acharei Ro'i. Here is a name given by Imeinu, by Hagar, HaMitzri, to this place. Therefore, Al Kain Karala Be'er Be'er L'Chai Ro'i. In even case Ben Bared, where it is, we're going to need that place later in Parshat Chai Sarah. Vatelet Hagar Avram Bain. Avram Shem Benoshel Dahagar Yishmael. Avram gave it the name. Rashi says Ruach HaKodesh. He knew.
Rabbi,
she told him.
Obviously, then Hagar told Abraham about what the angel had said because he's naming him Ishmael, like the angel says to do. How on earth could Abraham think that this is going to be the spiritual descendant when the name means he's a wild man that's going to be against everybody else?
Right. Excellent question. But for the answer, we have to get to the concept of the birth of Yishmael, of Yitzchak, or the announcement of that. But for that, you got to come back next week and the week after when we'll parse exactly that question. Because we have to understand the contrast between a Yishmael and a Yitzchak. What does Avram Avinu think here when he hears that that's the character of this Yishmael? That's the character. He's going to be everywhere. He's going to be a wild man. That's positive. How is that positive? Is it at all? We'll come back to it, God willing, next week. That's all we have time for today. Wish everyone a great day. And join us tonight. There's a Gemara shir for those who are interested in Masechet Sukkah. Tomorrow morning, Soul of the Siddur at 9 a.m. And Navi, of course, Thursday at 9:30, the aftermath of the death of Avshalom. ben David Hamelach. Adkan, have a great day. Be well.